What's up, everybody? How's it going? What a day. We're going live. Thank you all so much. Today's been such a crazy day. Hello. Pretty wild, historic day for the country, for the U.S. House of Representatives. I figured I would hop on. I want to answer some of your questions and also explain a little bit about what happened today. So the United States of America currently does not have a Speaker of the House. This is the first time in American history that a speaker has been deposed, vacated, kicked out, whatever you want to call it. But that happened today, and it was quite shocking. It was very dramatic. And one of the first questions here is, can someone explain this to me like I'm 5 years old? Happy to. So, in order to become speaker, when you're first elected, you have to win a majority of the House of Representatives. A majority of representatives have to elect you as speaker. Now, usually what happens is that one party wins the election and you get a majority in the House. And depending on how large that majority is, the people in that party, if Republicans win the election, Republicans select their speaker. If Democrats win the election, Democrats win their speaker. Now, in the last two Congresses, we have had historically small margins. So the Republicans have the majority by 2, 3, 4, or only 5 votes out of 435. Democrats similarly had a similar margin as well, very, very narrow. And so the more narrow your margin is, the more you need your entire party to come together to select that speaker, or really to get anything done. That's why earlier this year, we saw all those memes, all those jokes, whatever, about Kevin McCarthy and this long saga to become Speaker of the House, because Republicans had the smallest majority, smallest margin, about 5. It's give or take because sometimes there's a resignation or a vacancy or a death, but it's roughly 5, and sometimes even smaller. And so they basically needed everybody, and they could only lose less than 5 votes. Sometimes when House Democrats have a very large majority, if you have a majority that's up by 35, you can lose 20 votes. But in slim majorities, everyone in your party basically needs to vote the same way in order for your party to secure the speakership. So Kevin McCarthy, at the beginning of this term, was in that situation. And the way that he has handled that situation, he basically gave away the farm. He made all of these promises to all of these people, many of which were either incompatible or tangled, and it makes it very difficult for you to lead when you make so many promises and you have to uphold them. Then they are contradictory, and it's very difficult for you to govern after doing that. And that's the position that Kevin McCarthy was in. One of the concessions that he gave to his extreme right wing was something known as a one-person motion to vacate, where at any point, just one out of the over 200 members of his party could file a motion to vacate, which means that they could file a motion to kick him out, could call to kick him out at any point in time. Just one, not 5, not 10, not a critical mass calling for your resignation. You just needed one. So that has meant that for the last 9 months, Kevin McCarthy signed up to be held hostage. And he has been held hostage. Anytime one of the most extreme members of the Republican Party wanted something, they would threaten Kevin McCarthy with this motion to vacate. And as a result, well, maybe not just solely as a result of that, but but a major part of that has meant that McCarthy has governed in very extreme, bizarre ways over the last 9 months, just yielding all of this power to an extreme right wing. And all of that came to a head basically with the government shutdown. This extreme right wing wanted to make sure that, in order to avoid a government shutdown, you have to fund the government. They wanted to fund the government in their way prescriptively. They wanted to fund their government at their levels. They wanted to fund the government using their processes. Except the problem is that House Republicans only have barely a majority of the House of Representatives, but we have a Democratic Senate thanks to people like you who turned out to vote in critical states. We have a Democratic Senate and we have a Democratic president. And so if you're a Republican and you are that outgunned that way, you can't force through whatever you want. Joe Biden is not going to sign Marjorie Taylor Greene's little harebrained ideas. It's just not going to happen. Not going to, a Democratic Senate led by Chuck Schumer is not going to agree to this nonsense that these extremists want. But regardless, they were forcing Kevin McCarthy's hand anyway. And what happened is that when we avoided a government shutdown on Saturday, we did so with something known as a clean CR. We gave ourselves a 45-day extension. Well, that made these Republicans really mad. In fact, that extension was passed with more Democratic votes than Republican votes, which is actually quite rare. So what they decided to do was that a couple of things happened. First of all, Kevin McCarthy, we were supposed to be in recess this week. It was Kevin McCarthy that decided to take us out of recess, the House out of recess, and right back into work. I'm supposed to be in New York. I was supposed to be in community this week. We're supposed to be with folks that were affected by flooding, but Kevin McCarthy decided we're going to be back in the House this week. To do what? I don't even know. This, apparently. And what happened last night was that Matt Gaetz immediately filed a motion to vacate. And like I said, it just takes one member, one upset member, to file that motion to vacate. And when you file that motion to vacate, you get 48 hours before the vote must occur. You get 48 hours before that vote has to happen. And so he filed it last night, and for reasons that I do not have insight into, Kevin McCarthy decided that he was not going to wait. He was going to call that vote right away. Call that vote right away. And it seems as though that Republicans and Kevin McCarthy was under the impression that Democrats were going to elect a Republican speaker somehow. Why he thought that, I do not know. Why he made that assumption, I'm not quite sure. Perhaps it is because a Democratic Party in the past, maybe a Democratic Party in the 90s, would have been able to work more with Republicans. That was a different world. And today is a new day where there are fascists in the Republican Party that represent a very real threat to American democracy. And I don't think that I, nor many other people, are very interested in empowering a dynamic that has been very destructive and also an active participant in events like January 6th. On top of that, Kevin McCarthy somehow expected Democrats, I guess, shockingly, to bail him out on this when he has repeatedly made deals with Democrats that he has gone back on, when he's made promises that he continues to break. And so at a certain point, people can say, there's all these cliches about politicians and like all this other stuff, but there really is something to be said that in governance, your word is your bond. You cannot break promises over and over again with people that you work with. It's just not going to happen, especially when you need to rely on those people to cut a deal in such a tight margin. And so when you vote to overturn election results, when you cut a deal with the president and Leader Schumer and Leader Jeffries to raise the debt limit, and then you say, never mind. When you say, I will not allow a sham and baseless impeachment inquiry to go forward, the only way that I would allow it to go forward is if the majority of the House of Representatives votes to open it, and then you say, never mind. When you rely on Democratic votes to keep the government open on Saturday, and then on Sunday you wake up and you tell everybody they voted to shut down the government, and your word is your bond. And when you show that your word means nothing, then your bond means nothing. The thing about Washington and the thing about governance, and I think just the thing about trust in general, is that, we try to secure things as much as humanly possible. They say, okay, you want to give me this for that, or whatever, you want to strike a deal. The bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, right? But usually the way that things work is that there's some kind of sequence. And invariably, inevitably, there comes a point where you actually do just have to trust that other person is going to do what they say they're going to do. That sometimes you can't secure everything 100,000%, even just in terms of House rules. Like if I say I will vote on this, or I'm open to discussing that, if we can bring up this issue next week, or if we can vote on that next week, those kinds of conversations happen all the time. And whether you like it or not, or this, that, the other, that's part of how governance works in a diverse nation that elects 435 different elected representatives who all negotiate different priorities. And if you do that, there's always invariably a point where someone has to commit first, and they put their trust in that other person who says, I got you next week at this point, whatever. And when you go out on that limb for that person, and then that person thanks you by not doing what they said they're going to do, you end up in this situation. It's not just with Democrats, it's with many people in his own party. You don't end up in this situation without some sort of personal responsibility. He was the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, third in line to the presidency. And this is a serious matter and a serious responsibility that actually does transcend party. It does transcend party. Once you are Speaker of the House, you are responsible for the entire country. You are third in line to the presidency. You are, of course, very responsible to your party, the party that elected you, but you steward over the entire chamber. And when you burn half of that chamber, scorched earth, when you erode the institution, when you censure and remove Democrats from committees over complete partisan nonsense, over some Fox News conspiracy, not even as good as a Fox News conspiracy theory, but when you start stripping Democrats from committees, when you defend members that have been indicted on 13 federal charges, like George Santos has, from wire fraud to lying to members of Congress, when you defend your own members who have threatened the lives of other members, sharing violent depictions of murder of other members of Congress, and you stand up and you say, that's okay with me, that bill starts to rack up real fast. It starts to rack up real fast. And on top of it all, what blows my mind is the fact that apparently this guy and a lot of Republicans from their statements somehow felt entitled to Democrats bailing them out, or somehow felt like Democrats were going to vote for them in some way, shape, or form without even asking for it. Without even asking for it. It's not like people said, yeah, like I 100% got you on this specific vote tomorrow. They did not work it. They did not call. They did not try to deal. In fact, they played in everyone's face. And then they expected, after playing in everybody's face, that we were somehow going to vote to maintain this speakership. It is astonishing to me that an individual elected to become Speaker of the House somehow was engaged in so much magical thinking around vote counts and around how this institution can remain together. And I think, this moment is not good. I want to be clear about that. I don't think it's cute or funny, but I also think that actions have consequences. And if we do not follow through on the natural consequences of reckless behavior, then we enable that behavior. A vote for Kevin McCarthy would have meant a continued vote for the enabling of the most extreme elements of the Republican Party, period. And I find it interesting. I find it a study in leadership. But, it's not good per se that, the third seat in line to the presidency is currently vacant. However, that doesn't mean that you uphold a person that is being destructive just because. And as far as the Republican caucus goes, they are now in their own form of disarray. And we have no idea what results from this. And frankly, I'm not sure what is going to prevent this from necessarily happening again, to be honest. That is up to them. Our job is to be responsible stewards of government for the people who we are elected to represent and steward. And our solidarity, our cohesion in this moment, it does inject some degree of stability here. And, I think that's where we're at right now. The House has adjourned for a week, so we will not have a Speaker of the House for at least another 7 days. The Republican caucus is going to have to figure out who their new leader is. They are in chaos, but also Republican leadership creates chaos. We had 4 months. We had 4 years of chaos under Donald Trump. You have chaos under a Republican majority. Every single government shutdown in the last 30 years has happened under a Republican majority, has happened under a Republican House. They are chaos. And that's, what it is. Those are the dynamics of the situation. So I'm going to pop into some of your all's questions here and see if there's anything you all have, and see what questions you all have about the situation. So feel free to put them in. Someone says, what does this week off do for the timeline for the budget/CR? So for those of you, as I mentioned earlier, we had a 45-day extension on the government shutdown. That 45, I mean, people will say it's technically 47. Let's just round it to 45, okay? We have 45-day extension on the government shutdown. We didn't solve the government shutdown, but we at least got us an extension. We were supposed to be using this time to resolve that problem. Now, there is not a Speaker of the House. There is not one this week, and there will not be one until some point, maybe next week. So out of 45 days, over a month, we are now burning 2 weeks with no speaker. During this period of time, committees cannot meet, regular business cannot happen in the same degree. And so we are burning precious time until the next clock runs out in 45 days. This is what Republicans are doing right now. So that's where we're at with that. Someone said, is there a chance of a Democratic speaker? Procedurally, okay, is there a political chance or is there a procedural chance? Procedurally, is it a possibility? Yes. Procedurally, all you would need would be 5 Republicans to vote with Democrats to elect Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker. You just need simple majority, 218, and you can name anyone Speaker. Now, politically, is that possible? Probably not. But, there are several representatives in the House. For example, we have 5 swing seats in New York, 5 or 6, I believe, swing seats in New York State. And a lot of them are in communities that actually voted for Joe Biden. So these are communities that can sometimes lean Dem, but due to a whole bunch of different factors last year, including redistricting and other things, Republicans captured them. So, politically, is it likely? No. But procedurally, is it possible? Yes. Let's see. Any other questions that you all have here? Someone said it's a bunch of old folks arguing. There are, in fact, a lot of old folks arguing about this. Looking here, I'm just trying to figure out some of your questions here. Is it possible that there might not be a new speaker due to the Republican schisms? What if they can't decide? If Republicans cannot get the numbers they need for a new speaker, we are basically in this procedural hell loop in the House that we were when we first started. So I don't know if you all remember, but in January we had to select a speaker, and it kept happening over and over and over and over again, and we couldn't do anything in the House until they finally elected somebody. The rules of the House are such that we kind of go into that absurd spiral again, and we literally have to sit in a room and they will call our names over and over and over again until someone reaches a majority. And so the House of Representatives, all legislation essentially grinds to a halt. It's very difficult to do anything else. Looking at some of your other, why wouldn't Kevin McCarthy wait the 48 hours? That's an excellent question to ask him. Question of the day, question of the hour. I think there's probably a lot of coulda, woulda, shouldas that people are going through right now. What would have happened if they just allowed the House to go into recess this week as previously scheduled? I'll tell you one thing. Kevin McCarthy would definitely still be Speaker today. Would he be Speaker when we got back? I don't know, but he would definitely still be Speaker today if he just let everyone go back to their communities as we were scheduled to have gone. What he was planning on doing otherwise, not exactly sure. If we have 43 days to avoid a shutdown, how do we proceed without a Speaker? We have to elect a Speaker before we address anything to do with the shutdown. That is simply where we are at procedurally according to the rules of the House. It is chaos. Once again, this has never before happened in American history. Never before in U.S. history. This is the first time a motion to vacate has even been filed in over 100 years, I believe. But this is the first successful motion to vacate in American history. We have never been in this situation before. So that is an issue that we've got. What is the Republicans' long game? I think right now they're just trying to survive. I don't know if they have a long game. They may tell you that the long game is for them to try to, honestly, their long game is to try to win a majority in Congress in next November's election, and expand that majority. That's what their long game is. Their long game is that you all will either not vote, stay at home, or vote for them so that they can keep their majority, grow their majority in the House, and either not have to deal with this or deal with this some more. But aside from that, they don't really have a long game right now. They're panicking. They don't even have a successor that is quickly or easily named. They're throwing out a bunch of different names, trying to figure out who they can even elect as speaker. Looking at some of your other questions here, could this have been McCarthy's roundabout way of quitting? I do not think so. I do not think he necessarily started this week thinking that this was how it was going to end. Oops. Oh, I forgot I could click on your questions. I should have done that. Can you explain to me how the far right extremes have a chokehold on their party and can it be stopped? The reason they have a chokehold on their party is because the Republican Party only has like roughly a handful of votes, more votes than Democrats. They have the majority, they have control of Congress, but not by many. And so that paired with critical rules changes that small minority demanded earlier this year, they changed the rules of the House to give them far more power over anyone who is speaker with this motion to vacate. What they did is, what that means is that in order to derail anything, you just need about 5 or 6 people. And so those 5 or 6 people can take the leadership of their party hostage and demand what they want. And I want to be clear that when people say that this is just about like this quote unquote extreme right wing or the most extreme elements of their party, or it's just 5 people, it's actually not. Because Kevin McCarthy is not a victim here. He agreed to these institutional changes. He supported and upheld some of the most extreme, racist, violent, law-breaking people in his party. He kicked out and punished and belittled any Republicans over the last couple of years that have tried to be and exercise any degree of independence. And listen, I am not here to defend any of these people, right? But there is something to be said for the fact that when Liz Cheney came out in favor of impeaching President Trump, he punished her. When Justin Amash came out and started calling out Trump and announced that he would become an independent, Kevin McCarthy stripped him of all of his committees. When Adam Kinzinger, again, I'm not a fan of any of these people. But what I am here to say is that some people, the people who got punished within the Republican Party under Kevin McCarthy's leadership, and the people who got enabled, that was Kevin McCarthy's decision and Kevin McCarthy's decision alone. That 5-seat margin, that 5-seat difference, that could have easily been made up of potentially some of the folks that Kevin McCarthy helped give the boot in this party. And if they were still around, if he hadn't made those choices. Easily. And so I think that to those who say that he's a victim of this, he has made a long pattern of decisions to continue to embolden and empower the same people who took down his leadership today. And not over a short period of time, not in January. He's done it over years. And when you are in a position of such high leadership, such as the speakership, normally what a responsible person would do would be to study history and to study lessons from your predecessors. And the last two Republican speakers also had their entire speakerships completely derailed due to the same underlying reasons. John Boehner and Paul Ryan. And when you study them, one would think that one of the lessons would be to make sure that you mitigate the same thing, one of the same factors that befell your predecessors. You wouldn't embolden it. You wouldn't strengthen it. But he did not do that. And that's one of the reasons that we're in this situation. So this idea that he is somehow a victim of this, no, he is responsible for this. So, that I think is a pretty important thing. What can the speaker pro tempore not do that an actual elected speaker can? A speaker pro tempore cannot do much. Their job is to basically stand in that chair and just gavel for core parliamentary procedures that are not of much legislative consequence. So, for example, a normal speaker and leadership, they decide what bills go to the floor. They often decide what bills can get a vote. That's why it's really important if Democrats or Republicans have the majority, because if you have a Republican Speaker of the House, then only Republican bills can get voted on and really go to the floor. If you have a Democratic Speaker of the House, then Democratic bills can get to the floor. And so things like so when Democrats had the majority, we voted on things like raising the minimum wage. We voted on things like universal background checks. We voted on climate issues. We voted on getting money out of politics, actually. The problem was the Senate, but that's a different story. The Senate's a different story. But the House of Representatives has actually passed pretty stunning legislation. Obviously, that's not great. Like, it's no consolation when it doesn't pass the Senate and Joe Manchin is spiking the child tax credit. But it is to say that if you actually looked at what House Democrats, the legislation that we've passed in the last couple of years, if that somehow had a clear runway to the president's desk, we would be living in a very different country right now. And so it matters. It matters what party has the House, because then you can negotiate with that Senate and you can get those things through, right? We got the child tax credit. Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, they worked to sabotage it and end it, but at least we had it for a period of time. And we want to work to get the majority so that we can revive it. We got those COVID checks. We had the student loan suspension. We had these things. And when you lose control of the House, then these negotiations oftentimes bring us backwards. But so in terms of what the speaker pro tempore can do, where basically he can only put us in this procedural loop. He can't make those political decisions, those politically consequential decisions. Only the formally elected speaker can. Looking at some of this here. People keep saying they'll nominate Trump with all that he's up against. Is that even possible? Once again, there's the question of politically possible or procedurally possible. Is it procedurally possible? Yes. The Speaker of the House does not have to be a sitting member of the United States Representatives. You can nominate anybody. And if you can get 218 members of the United States House of Representatives to agree on a single person to become Speaker, that person can become Speaker. So is it procedurally possible? Yes. Is it politically possible? That's the question. Now, there are members of Congress in very tough swing seats. In New York, for example, Westchester County has a swing seat, and they have a Republican representing them right now, but they voted for Biden by, I think, something like 10 points, if not more. So that representative needs to decide if they're going to, someone like, that representative needs to decide if they're going to politically cast a vote for Donald Trump when their community has voted for Joe Biden. But could he do it? Yes, it is procedurally possible. Politically possible? It's a big question mark. Looking at some more of your questions. Let's see. Is there a possibility? Let's see. Are you concerned we will have a shutdown in 44 days or so? Of course I'm concerned that we'll have a shutdown. We came within hours. I think we technically came within 2 or 3 hours, because after the House passed it, the Senate had it held up for a little while. We came within hours of a government shutdown on Saturday. We kicked the can for 45 days. And so we didn't really resolve any of the underlying issues. And so we are going to be back in a similar situation in mid-November, probably like around November 11th to 15th or so. I haven't dialed it out completely, but I think it's around then. And so now that we're burning 2 weeks on this drama that Republicans are having, this is counting down the clock on some of the important negotiations. So that is going to be an issue as well. Let's see. Someone said, will someone worse than Kevin likely be Speaker? I don't know. I can't say necessarily yes. And the reason for that is because McCarthy was particularly chaotic as a speaker. He was part of holding the entire United States debt ceiling hostage, the entire U.S. economy hostage in March. He made a promise. He cut a deal with the president in order to keep things afloat. Then he turned around and decided to renege on that deal. He's opened, completely baseless impeachment inquiries that are not based in fact, that have been completely debunked, where the own Republican witnesses have said that that they didn't even have a case to file articles. So he's been particularly chaotic. I actually think that there is potentially a world where there could be a better speaker. And by that, I don't necessarily even mean one that is more like moderate, because that is a word that is very relative in the Republican Party. But I think it is possible that there could be a replacement of a speaker that is more stable. And so we'll see with that. But I don't think that this results or ends in one of those most extreme members. But we shall see. Someone said he was not a leader, which caused so much internal strife. I mean, it's true. And here's the thing. House of Representatives, not a place for the weak. It's just not a place for the weak. No offense to my friends in the Senate, but the Senate, they've got a filibuster. They've got certain kinds of majorities. They have a quarter of the members of the House of Representatives. It's a much slower institution. The Senate doesn't have to there's a lot of things that they just don't really have to deal with, and a lot of questions that they don't have to answer. And frankly, there's a lot of institutions and rules that they can hide behind in the Senate. The House doesn't. The House has the numbers, and it's not for the weak. It is a place where you have to work with hundreds of other people, whether you like it or not. And, people, there was a time when the shoe was on the other foot and Democrats had the same slim margin that Kevin McCarthy has right now with Republicans. And Republicans were egging me on to do what is happening now. But here's the problem with that. It's like you get one card and then you play it, and now what? And who suffers? And when you actually care about policy and governance, and when there are things that you actually want to fight for, like tuition-free public colleges and universities, and raising the minimum wage, and Medicare for all, and figuring out how we get there, and you know what? Let's start with capping the price of insulin at $35. Let's start there. Or you know what? Let's at least start with a child tax credit as almost like a pilot program of a universal basic income for kids. Like, there is a certain point where you have to figure out what you're going to take. And if you are interested in making people's lives better, it's not for the weak. It's not for the weak. And there are times when you have to make decisions that are excruciating, but you make them because your theory of change is in the faith of a dual system, of a dual power, where my limitations are where mass movements begin. And there's a duality, there's a symbiotic relationship, and a lot of times I have to make decisions between two really, excuse my French, two really shitty options. But I know, as horrible as that is why why we also work outside of an electoral structure to organize to change the conditions in this country, so that we don't have to make this choice between two evils all the time. And that requires a certain maturity, it requires a certain long game, and it requires a certain kind of motivation and what you're motivated for. And that is one of the big differences when people try to say, oh, the left and the right are the same. They're not the same. They're not the same. We're interested in accomplishing something. We believe in public power. And the extreme right wing literally does not even believe in government. They don't believe in government. And they don't believe in child tax credits. They don't believe in WIC. They don't believe in public schools being fully publicly funded. They don't believe in public systems. They definitely don't believe in health care for all. They don't believe in Social Security. They don't believe in Medicare. They don't believe in climate change. It is easy to do these things when you don't really believe in anything except this, right? And it's easy to make policy decisions by YouTube, and it's easy to make political decisions by meme, and maybe you will have some people that are cheering, some meme accounts in your corner that are cheering you on, but my district and the people in my community are the people who suffer from being ignored. And I have a responsibility to them. And it really, really sucks sometimes when you have to decide something or nothing. And sometimes the answer is nothing. Sometimes the answer legitimately is, I would rather have nothing in this situation than to deal with something else. But sometimes the answer is something. Sometimes the answer is something. And you have to know, you have to have the discretion of when that is. So with all that, I bid you all adieu. That's the update from today. And we'll see ya. Bye-bye.